This is the Hacking Real Estate Podcast, Season 2, Episode 8.
People want to invest where they're extremely comfortable. All I hear is I'm looking in Florida, Arizona, New Jersey, California. I want to do Airbnbs in Las Vegas. I want to do an Airbnb here because that's what they see and it's very fancy and it's nice. But not every situation is for everybody. Don't set yourself up for failure where you're buying houses you can't afford the maintenance, or you think you end up falling in love with the place and overpaying for it because that's kind of where you're comfortable and. So it's great to be able to buy in your backyard, and if you can make a business out of that, I think it would be awesome because I would love to be able to see these properties and kind of work on them and be there when things happen. But sometimes when you get out of your comfort zone and states you've never been to, building trust with people you've never met, that might be where you'll find the greatest success. So definitely go out and seek, not to be cheesy, but seek that great perhaps in your business and see what else is out there.
Welcome to the Hacking Real Estate Podcast, where we dive into the stories of seasoned, hands-on, and tech-savvy real estate investors. We'll learn the strategies and tools they use to maximize returns and minimize hassle, all while navigating the rapidly changing real estate market. I'm your co-host, Brandon Hall, and managing partner of Hall CPA, and I'm sitting alongside my co-host, Vikas Gupta, CEO of Azebo. With our combined 15 years of experience in real estate investing and entrepreneurship, we're here to help you up your real estate game. Let's get hacking.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of the Hacking Real Estate Podcast. Our guest today is Michael Macon. He is a Jersey City native turned Southern California transplant. He's worked for major brands like American Express and JP Morgan Chase, and he's also worked in growth-focused roles for California tech startups. Since 2021, he's been focused on real estate investment, specifically in the Midwest. He is a champion for affordable housing and Section 8 living solutions, and he has an active voice on social media where he demystifies Section 8 housing and highlights the Midwest's investment opportunities. Mike, welcome to the show.
Hi, glad to be here.
So in your own words, can you tell us about your real estate journey?
Yeah, so the journey, as you mentioned, started a few years back. My career has always been in large corporations, kind of corporate America. But during COVID, there was a kind of a lot of flux in that. So I actually started a new job at a new tech company, a big up-and-coming company, the day that company shut down because an employee got COVID. So I'd never been in the office, and my entire experience there was remote. I ended up working there for about 9 months. But the beginning of that remote phase was very tough on me. I didn't really like it. It was a big adjustment. I was stuck in the house. I was in California, away from all my friends and family. And I just really wanted to do something that was more out and about, tangible. One of my favorite parts about work was being in the office. So I'm sitting home and I'm seeing all these realtors I know out and showing houses and doing all this really cool stuff during COVID. So when I quit my job, the first thing I did was pick up a real estate agent course. Did that for a while. Ended up taking me about 8 months to get my license. Obviously, everybody during COVID became a real estate agent. It was really popular as things kind of, things were skyrocketing. People were stuck in the house. Real estate became this really sexy, fun thing on social media. So anyway, California was pretty backed up. It took me about 8 months to get my license, in which case I ran out of money from my job. So I ended up taking another tech job. I never really got my real estate career as an agent off the ground. I ended up making some missteps in the beginning. As far as which team I joined or which brokerage I was a part of. And it just all took too much time. So once I got back into corporate America, I kind of got readjusted to the remote work, kind of found my niche in my last role. And I decided the best way for me to continue in this real estate journey was through investing. I had some cash saved up. I didn't have the time or the energy to become a brand new agent. So I figured, let me try here and to pivot. I initially wanted to kind of invest where I know, as with most people. You look directly in your backyard, which for me was Los Angeles, and every home was, $1 million. And my home where I grew up was New Jersey, which Jersey City is also at the top of the list of most expensive real estate in the world. So that became really tough. So I really started trying to find opportunities, and I was still looking for a diamond in the rough. I would analyze tons of properties. I mean, almost every property that came up on Zillow in New Jersey from December to January, that time period, I had in my model. I ran the numbers. I understood what was going on. I had a property management, had an agent, had everything set up, but it just never felt right. It was just too expensive for my risk tolerance. Ended up talking to some people, getting around, and I found a niche investing in the Midwest. First time I actually thought that this was possible. I looked up some properties, put them in the analyzer that I have, the little Excel spreadsheet, and I was blown away at how vastly different the numbers were. I'm talking like going from, cap spreads of 1% to cap spreads of 12, 13%, investments of, $100,000 down payment plus 75,000 in renovation to a turnkey property with $25,000 down payment and a 12% cap rate. I mean, it was a no-brainer in my mind that I was going to learn here. So within, I would say, 5 weeks, I had a property under contract, I had property management set up, and I had everything to get my first property. And to me, that was just going to be a learning experience until, again, as you mentioned, I learned about affordable housing and Section 8, and just really started rolling from there. And I started building that portfolio and really focusing on that business. And now, to me, I mean, one day I would like to buy a house in California, New Jersey, but from the numbers standpoint, to me, it now seems a little bit ridiculous and kind of purposeless. So I really found the niche there and found a team. And yeah, that's kind of been where it is and where I'm now. Now I have 6 properties in the Midwest and close on another one hopefully next week. And I'm going to continue to grow from there.
And are they all single family homes?
No, I have a mix. I have a few single families and a few multifamilies. No real particular reason as to why. I like the multifamilies because they have the most cash flow at the end of the day. I wouldn't say the most cash flow. Let me say the most revenue, right? The highest rent roll. But what I found is that everybody wants to buy multifamily properties, and single family properties were being overlooked to the fact that, the cap rates on some of these single families are good, and you're buying them at less than half. Like a single family would go for less than half of what an equivalent duplex would go for. So the equivalent numbers, equivalent rent rolls, single families just seem to me like a good opportunity. So I went in. I have a few of those now. They've been great.
Wow. I mean, that's a really interesting story. I think there's one part of it though that I want to dig into that I feel like you kind of made a jump. Tell us more about what got you into and how you got into affordable housing in Section 8.
So Section 8 is something that is really stigmatized. Okay, my first property was a duplex. It was a $110,000 purchase price. And based on using tools like Rentometer and things like that, I tagged a rent that's somewhere between $850 and $1,000 based on the quality. Now, this place was recently renovated, but recently renovated in the Midwest by flippers kind of means like everything as cheap as humanly possible, right? Nothing really works once you take possession of the property, but it still looked nice.
That's not just the Midwest.
Yeah, probably everywhere, right?
When I was looking to buy a home, there was one agent / flipper that was known in the like East LA, Highland Park, Echo Park area for doing just the cheapest flips, and even like doing just the open house, and you would see like knobs falling off of cabinets, shelves that are slanting down, just terrible. So just I'm not a Midwesterner, but in the interests of Midwesterners, having lived in Chicago for 2 years, it's not just a Midwest issue. Yes.
They're not alone. Yeah, no, I actually, to sidetrack, I was under contract in one property. And being an out-of-state investor, I often don't even see the properties before I take possession. Some of them I haven't ever seen in the inside of ever. But I actually went to the inspection of this one, luckily, because it already had a tenant downstairs, had a tenant upstairs that didn't want to move. And when you look at the pictures on Zillow, it looked beautiful. Like, I was so hyped about this house. It was different than the first house with the Section 8 tenant, which I'll get back to. But we finally got there. And while the pictures look great, everything was destroyed in the house. And the property manager was there. He's like, guys, don't worry. We don't want to cancel the contract. Anything you need fixed, let us know. We'll do. It needed new furnaces because they were both off and it was the summertime, which was fine. But then they were still working on the upstairs unit. And we went there. And not only were they working through the people living there, we watched as their workers were on YouTube watching sink installation videos while they're working on the sink. And then we're like, dude, And then he's like, oh yeah, the floors are already done. And I look and there's stains all over the floors. I'm like, wait, what do you mean they're already done? And then I look at the floor and he's like, oh, somebody must have spilled food or something. I was like, what is this? The closets downstairs were closets, but they didn't have rods or anything. They didn't have shelving. The sink or the shower, the kind of knob where the water comes out of, was twisted and was like falling off. They had to like hold it to get water through. It was, I don't know. We canceled that contract immediately. That property did sell though, so who knows? But back to Section 8. So again, I bought the property for $110,000. Rentometer had the rent between $850 and $1,000, and I was new. It was my first property. I was being greedy. I put nice appliances in there. I was like, I'm going to ask for top of market rent, and I'm going to go for it. So I put it up for $1,000 rent, and got only Section 8 applicants. And in the beginning, you know, I still had that stigma of like, no, I don't want to rent the Section 8. They're going to destroy the place. I don't want to deal with it. Blah blah blah. So I rented to 2 tenants at, one was $975 and the other was $925. Yeah, so they ended up taking the place, and I thought I was great. You know, I got top of market, got exactly what I wanted. This is awesome. But then very quickly, meaning like before they even moved in, the problem started. Hey, I can't pay until I get my deposit from the other place. Okay. Hey, can I move in? I'll give you the deposit once I move in. Okay. I'm new to this. I'm being nice. Okay. Neither one of those tenants, one never paid me $1 ever. And the other one has actually been a pretty good tenant after the first few months, but it was a real struggle to get consistent communication, consistent income, rent paid in a timely manner. And again, the first tenant had to be evicted because I never got a dime from them. So what I learned was when you buy these cheap homes, they're cheap for a reason, right? Like nobody's just giving you free money, especially in this game. So when you're buying properties in you know, most people call them like C or D neighborhoods, and you're asking for rent that's above kind of the market rent, you know, to try to maximize the profit, it's just not going to work. You know, you're getting people who want to live in a nice place, but have to absolutely stretch their budget as far as humanly possible to make that happen. So then, you know, I'm just kind of doing this. We put the place back up. We evicted the one tenant, and just in my kind of, you know, research and looking at other properties and talking to people and using TikTok and YouTube and things like that, I actually found a couple of Section 8 influencers just randomly on Instagram. And, you know, I followed them. I was like, oh, I'm curious. Like, you know, we only got Section 8 tenants, so it's a big part of the market. Like, let me learn more about it. I really knew nothing about it. Like the fact that it's guaranteed income, the fact that there's like a whole voucher process, the fact that anybody can do it. Like I knew none of this. So I really just deep dove into that world. I followed a bunch of influencers. One in particular, Tim Leak, who I've met with and done things with since. Like really opened my eyes to this world, because to be honest, a few of the Section 8 influencers out there are kind of like, I don't know, skeevy. Like they really talk about just like how much money they make from the tenants and things like that, which is fine. That's what we're all in this for. But this guy was really talking about how it's affordable housing and, you know, the demographics of people who use it and how like there's a lot of stigma around them, but if you provide them quality housing, they typically take care of it and things like that. I didn't know that you can kind of screen the tenants yourself, things like that. So anyway, once I determined that, I learned how to evaluate Section 8 rent. Section 8 basically has a process where the Housing and Urban Development puts out a budget each year in October or September. And then that goes to every zip code in the country where the unique metropolitan areas or townships or whatever distribute that income based on zip code. So you can actually go and see for a 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, 4 or 5, whatever, what they will pay. So there's almost zero debate in rent. You don't have to use tools like Rentometer. You don't have to guess. You don't have to look at the neighborhood and kind of understand it. You can literally just go to HUD, see exactly what your zip code will get for a 2-bedroom, and that's it. And it pays top of market. They typically pay something like 20 to 40% premium. No, 40% is a little high. Maybe like 10 to 20% premium on top of what a standard apartment would get. So for example, a standard 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 1 bath for the house that I'm talking about with a 975 typically went for 850. So I asked for a lot in 975, which is why I got people who really couldn't afford it. Section 8, the new tenant is 1055. They approved. So I would get almost $200 more for that unit. And because the tenant that I chose has very low income, Section 8 pays 100% of that. So there's no issues. and the tenant still covers utilities, just like in any deal. Sometimes that's subsidized by the government as well. They give them some assistance, and sometimes it's paid for by them. But Section 8 determines all that when they look at their income and things like that. So yeah, to me, it was a no-brainer. If I can't afford to invest in really high-end homes with people who have great jobs and can kind of pay their rent on time, so my niche has become homes that I can afford with rent that's subsidized by the government, just because it makes it really easy for me as a small investor to kind of guarantee my rent. And we're also giving homes to people who don't have many other options. The tenant for the new place that I'm under contract for, we put it up for rent. And this woman has gone through 2 other Section 8 homes, and she's been evicted by Section 8 because the landlords have failed to live up to their responsibilities. So every Section 8 unit gets inspected once a year. The landlord gets 3 chances to fix any issues. And if they don't, then the tenant has to move. So this poor woman has had to move twice with 3 kids just because the landlord didn't hold up their end of the bargain. So in my mind, I'm getting guaranteed rent for the most part. They usually pay between 70 and 100% depending on the tenant's individual situation. And we could talk more about that. But overall, with Section 8, you're giving, if you're a good landlord, you're giving quality housing to people who otherwise don't get it. So yeah, I found it to be a really powerful program for landlords. And if you do it right, it can be really advantageous for renters as well.
Well, thank you. I think that was a really great overview of the Section 8 program. I do have a couple of questions, if you don't mind.
Explore Azibo for a streamlined approach to property management. Our comprehensive platform simplifies every aspect of managing your rental units. From diverse rent collection methods to finding and securing high-quality tenants through smart applications and thorough screening, Azibo has you covered. Benefit from state-specific digital lease agreements, tailored accounting, tax tools for property owners, and an efficient maintenance request system. Plus, enjoy substantial savings with affordable property insurance tailored to your needs. Embrace the smarter, cost-effective way to manage your rental properties with Azibo. Join our community of savvy property owners and start for free at azibo.com. That's azibo.com.
Tell us a little bit about that inspection process. Like, how onerous is it? What are they looking for? Does it require you to invest more than you would have to outside of being in Section 8?
Yeah, no, it's I think especially in certain cities, I invest a lot in Cleveland, and there's been a lot of issues with kind of slumlords and things like that. Really, the inspection is basically just making sure the house is livable. I think the inspection I did most recently, I think we had to just fix the CO2 sensor. We had to put a new CO2 sensor in. One of my properties did not have, it was not Section 8 before, so this was new, but it didn't have a guardrail. So we put in a guardrail. That was $100. So it's really just, they just want to make sure that people have somewhere livable. The quality of the fixtures and things like that isn't really top of their mind. It's mainly things like safety. Do the outlets work? Is there a CO2 sensor, fire alarms, things like that? Are there banisters in the right places? Are the stairs work? Things like that. I haven't had many issues, but there is a checklist that you can get from Section 8. So I'm sure every Section 8 housing authority, each city has them differently. So like mine, it might be different from the one in St. Louis and things like that. So you should probably be able to get a checklist. But I would say if your goal is to provide livable housing, then it shouldn't be anything that you're not already expecting to put in. And I don't think any fix will be more than a couple $100, unless something really goes wrong with the property and it's completely unlivable.
Mm-hmm. And do you have to enroll your unit, or how does that work?
Yeah, so the process works pretty much just like renting any apartment. So you put it up for rent on Zillow, apartments.com, whatever you want to do, Craigslist. And then the applicants actually get vouchers. So they go to Section 8, they say, hey, I'm a single mother, I have 2 kids. Section 8 evaluates their income and determines based on their situation how much they'll be willing to give them for rent. They then take that voucher, do just like anybody else. They go on Zillow, apartments.com, whatever, look for the apartment of their dreams. Then they come to you with their application. They say, hey, I'm a voucher recipient. I have a voucher for this rent amount. cool. You do a background check and tenant screening just like anybody else. If you do decide to select them, then you then send their application for your unit to Section 8. Section 8 will approve it. They'll maybe negotiate rent with you, so that happens, but they'll typically approve it. They'll send an inspector out, and as quick as the day the inspector gets there, the tenant can move in. I think the inspection part is definitely an added part of the process. And to be honest, it does slow things down sometimes. To have a physical inspector go to, I think Cleveland has 15,000 voucher recipients. So to constantly inspect these places is a burden. So that might add a couple of weeks to the timeline if you're trying to get a tenant in fast. But again, the rent is guaranteed and it makes it really easy. So yeah, I'd say it's 90% normal. And then the inspection is kind of that added 10% that's a little bit different.
Mm-hmm. But once your unit is in, so like let's say that like you have a Section 8 tenant in your unit, that person moves, you're getting a new Section 8 tenant in. Are you already in, or they have to inspect it on move in again?
Yeah, new inspection.
Oh, okay.
Because think about it from their perspective, right? Let's say they inspect your unit October 15th for the yearly inspection. And then this tenant moves out in, August. You're applying again in September for a new tenant. That's 9 months since your last inspection. Who knows what happened to that property? So they want to make sure that when a new tenant moves in, they do a live inspection right then and there.
Got it. And then from a tenant screening perspective, it's this, you get to decide on all the normal criteria that you would decide on.
Yeah. I have my Section 8 tenants. I've only had one since I've been using Azebo, but I had our tenants just apply through Azebo, just like everybody else. They paid the application fee, and I looked at their record and see all the same things, and you get to make the same judgment you can with anybody else. Section 8's goal is to allow tenants to live wherever they want. So you can do all the same. You can call their previous landlords, you can call for references, you see their work history, you see their credit score, all the same things.
Mm-hmm. Got it. And you said that Section 8, at least in your area, is willing to pay more than a non-Section 8 tenant would typically pay in the market. So does that mean that when you're listing your property for rent, you're listing it at the Section 8 price that's listed in that report that you mentioned?
Yeah, for sure. I think most people, they pay above market rent because they want people to use the program. Section 8 does have a lot of stigma. And in general, people want to, you invest in real estate, you want to have these nice properties that you own and things like that. But, just doing things with poor individuals tends to sometimes have a stigma to it. So they really want to encourage people to use it. And I think you can see kind of Section 8, typically like CHMA in my neighborhood has, videos and stuff where they talk about the program and why they pay over market. But basically they want landlords to be able to offer their units to Section 8. And because it's completely voluntary, just like any other business, you have to incentivize people to use your product, right? So their incentive is the guaranteed rent and the above market rates. Because if they wouldn't, then chances are not a lot of people would rent a Section 8 just because of the stigma.
Mm-hmm. And then you mentioned that this particular tenant that you gave us, the D-Big, your first tenant, they were 100% covered by Section 8, but some folks aren't. So then you're getting, let's say, 80% from the housing authority, and then 20% you're collecting from the tenant directly.
Yeah. So Section 8, when they look at a tenant's income, the tenant is going to be responsible for up to 30% of the rent amount. And if they want to pay more, so let's say they want to move into a nicer neighborhood because of a school district or whatever, they can go sometimes up to 40% if it's approved by Section 8. So one, if they want to move into a nicer neighborhood, you can do that. Two, sometimes landlords can kind of take advantage and raise the rent and then get them to pay. But typically, they'll pay up to 30% of their income. That causes the same issues with typical rent collection, right? I mean, these are lower income individuals. 30% of not a lot of money is a lot of money to them. So, sometimes you do have issues where, so my other Section 8 tenant, he pays like $750 and owes about $300. So getting that $300 is sometimes difficult. There's late payments, there's the runaround. Oh, I'll get it to you next week, this and that. Same thing with any kind of tenant. So again, on Section 8, they give you full authority to handle your unit as you would handle any unit. So Section 8 tenants can be evicted, just like any other tenant. If they're late, you can charge them late fees. And one kind of powerful motivation to get tenants to kind of pay on time and be responsible for your property is the fact that if you do report them to Section 8, they will lose their voucher. So it takes sometimes years for people to get vouchers. So people really don't want to lose them. Most people, you get evicted. A lot of times, if you don't even go through the court proceedings fully, it doesn't go on your record. You kind of move on. But with Section 8, if you get evicted and you lose your voucher, you're one step closer in some cases to homelessness, or staying on couches or doing something. So yeah, I feel like the stigma around Section 8 says that they're a huge hassle, a huge pain. But in my limited experience and in the experience of other Section 8 investors I talk to, people are really motivated to be good tenants. You're always going to find I'll say it's probably a pretty high percentage, 10, 15% that destroy property and are genuinely irresponsible. But for the most part, a lot of the people you're renting to are single mothers with kids. One of my tenants is disabled, and we've done things to kind of update his properties with wider doors and newer carpets and ramps. So like these people really don't want to leave these properties. And I'll give one specific example where the tenant I inherited had a weird agreement where he was paying less than his fair share, or I don't want to say fair share, less than what he owed to the previous landlord. And even the paperwork on the property that I got was incorrect. And I actually, funny enough, didn't notice it until I started putting my properties in a Zebo, and was like, wait, the government portion plus his portion does not equal the rent amount. What's going on here? And he was paying $75 a month less to the previous landlord. Now, previous landlord, complete slumlord, didn't even live in the country, had no idea what was going on with these properties, probably never looked at their bank accounts. But I asked to, hey, you got to pay the right amount. I have mortgages, and this is not just, I'm not this rich landlord profiting off this. And it took a while to do it. At first, the first month I had him, I think I got the rent 3 weeks late. And then the next month, I think I got it the month after. I think I got November rent in December. And I just had my property manager tell him, hey, dude, we know you want to stay here. We're not asking you to leave. But if you can't afford your portion, I will go back to Section 8 and ask them to readjust. And he knows that if I do that, he might get in trouble with Section 8 and be in, even if I don't evict him, he might be eligible to lose his voucher. Nobody wants to do that. Every month I've been paid on time since. Now, to be fair to him, we are going to ask for a readjustment with his blessing, because with that additional ask from me to pay that full amount, I think it's stretching him a little thin. So we are going to ask for that readjustment when his lease comes up in May, but it's not going to be anything contentious. It's going to be hey, this might now be putting it, the numbers were clearly ran wrong at some point. It might now be putting him above that 30% threshold, or he might have lost income, in which case let's work on it, because if you do lose income, Section 8 will pick up the slack.
Got it. All right. So you've mentioned a Zebo, and in full disclosure, we should say Mike works for a Zebo, joined us in November. You've mentioned a Zebo a few times. You've also mentioned a property manager, and you've also mentioned that these are all out-of-state properties, some of which you have never seen the inside. So with all that, tell us a little bit about the operations. How are you running this business? Who's doing what? And how are you managing it all?
Yeah, me personally, it's been a learning experience for sure. So I kind of, as I mentioned earlier, found out about this out-of-state thing, and 5 weeks later bought a property in a place I've never been to. And I actually didn't see that property until 6 months later. I think the first time I stepped foot in that property was October, and I bought it in March. So I just dove in fully, just finding an agent on Zillow. Hey, can you look at this property for me? Great, let's put it under contract. Within a couple of days. So I met this agent through Zillow. He happened to have a bunch of properties himself. And when I talked to him, I was like, hey, dude, I really don't know much about how this works. Let me know when I should call in the property management company that I've been talking to, and get them involved in the situation. And he honestly said, he was like, hey, dude, I've never done this before. I've owned a bunch of properties, but I've been getting these out-of-state clients coming in similar to yourself. And I've thought about adding property management, like starting a property management business. He at first didn't want to even like charge me anything or like do this. He just wanted to do it as a learning experience. So I took it as, okay, I'll save a little bit of money using this guy. He seems to know what he's talking about. I put a lot of trust in him. And we've been working together now for almost a year. His business has since exploded. He's gotten a couple other investors, and now he's managing close to 50 properties or so. But it has definitely been a learning experience. And I don't know if I would necessarily recommend it to new investors.
When you say recommend it, you mean working with someone who's brand new to property management?
Yeah, for sure. Or even like if you want a realtor to help you with out-of-state investing, don't go with a new realtor because I have to rely a lot on him to explain to me what's going on in the house. I get videos, or if we look at a bunch of houses, sometimes I don't even get videos. But we pretty much, when he breaks it down to me, he knows what I'm looking for. He knows what I want, and he knows how to look at a property and explain what's going on because he's done it himself for so long. So he'll explain to me electrical issues and plumbing issues and all these things that I had no idea about. So it's been really good working with him, but some of the things we're growing with together. Little thing, or I don't want to say little things, invoicing. At first he would just tell me like, hey, this came up, it's $200. I'd send him some money. Now after a year, we have an invoice system where like he invoices me once a month for things. Rent collection was pretty haphazard. Sometimes people would cash out me, sometimes they would cash out him. Like sometimes I would try to get them to pay with bank transfer. Like it was a mess. Now he collects rent, he sends it to me in one lump sum. So we're kind of building this repertoire together. We don't have a contract. Like we're putting together the contract because I was like, hey, dude, we're getting a lot of properties. Like we need to have something in paper. So like I'm going through growing pains with him in this business, which for me is fun. I like to learn. I still take a lot of the management stuff hands-on and dealing with Section 8, dealing with utilities, things like that. But would I recommend another investor to do this? Probably not. I mean, I think I probably spend a lot of money fixing issues that were growing pains, and I've learned from, but probably wouldn't have happened, or friends who use professional property managers didn't go through. So it's been fun, and I feel like I've learned a lot than my friends who use professional property managers. I've learned a lot more because I'm very hands-on, and we're kind of going through it together. But yeah, I would say if you're looking for passive income, real estate's probably not the way to go one way or the other, but definitely doing a lot of the work yourself, it really does take a toll, and kind of learning the process with somebody else who's new is a lot of fun in my mind, but it can get expensive, and you have to really want to take that journey.
So what is he managing now, and what are you managing now?
Yeah, so he's the man on the ground. He gets all tenant communications. He gets all maintenance requests. He has a network of people who do all the work that we have, plumbers. So he does all of that stuff. Anything in regards to the business, I tend to do. So accounting and bookkeeping, all that stuff, obviously. Like I don't get kind of a neat statement with rent in and expenses out. That's kind of messy. And then anything to do with utilities or Section 8 or really things to do with money, I try to take on myself. And also like anything I can do over email and stuff, I tend to do because I want his time spent at the property and working on the property. I don't want him on the phone with the water company or Section 8 or something like that. So I try to handle a lot of the administrative tasks while he does what's on the ground. But again, as he grows in his property management business, he's starting to take on more, and even thinking about hiring people to kind of help out with some of the stuff that a more professional would do.
Got it. And are you paying him a percentage of rent?
Actually, to be honest, I refused to go for free because I wanted him to have some stake in the game. So in my personal situation, I still ended up paying him a percentage.
So you started free, and now you're on a much more sort of formalized schedule, it sounds like.
So yeah, it's definitely a very unique, I'd say, situation.
So if he's collecting the rent, he's managing all the vendors and all the maintenance. Like, what are you using software like ours for?
Yeah, so he collects the rent and basically just sends me a single bank transfer. And the vendors and such, he pays, and then he invoices me once a month. But again, it's not through a software. It's basically an email with a PDF. his company's letterhead and things like that. So for me, software helps reconcile the rent. He sends me, a few $1,000 in one transaction. I need to be able to know what rent is in there, who was late, who was short, what tenant, one tenant paid me $8 short last month. Like, I need to be able to see that in real time. And then when he sends me an invoice, that's one transaction out, but it's going to be details for 6, 7 different properties. Or 7 different units. So I use software to make sure that, the plumbing cost went to this unit. And then, so over time I can see, like, all right, I get once a month invoice from him. I get once a month rent payment from him, but I can look and see exactly who's doing it. And that's kind of like a little bit of the business stuff, right? A lot of the bigger property managers might send you a P&L or kind of have a accounting software in their solution. But for me, who really enjoys doing it himself and really wants to be the owner of this business, I don't really want it to be passive income. I want to make sure that I'm on top of that stuff all the time, and I have it organized the way I like and things like that. And I attribute things to the places where I want to attribute them and such. So for me, software really makes that easy. Because I was doing it in Excel before, and I'm a finance guy. I worked in banking. I started in FP&A. Like, I thought I knew Excel, and I had these fancy P&Ls and stuff, but it was just such a huge pain to have to like copy credit card transactions, put them in the P&L, remember to go do it. And at the time I was using my personal credit card, which wasn't great. So like all these things now have been so much easier with software, where like I swipe the card, day later I go into my account, I can see that there's a transaction untagged, tag it, and it just makes life so much easier. And that's from somebody who has specialized and lived their life in Excel. It's a world of difference.
Great. Well, yeah, I think certainly, obviously as the CEO of a real estate software company, I'm a proponent of using software, whether it's ours or someone else's. But, I have a Excel personal budget that I built in 2004, where I would like do the exact copy paste transactions, manually categorize things, and then I moved it all to software because it's kind of a pain. Well, cool. Well, this has been fantastic, and I'm sure there's a lot more we could cover, but we're coming up on time here. So if you don't mind, I'd like to go into our 3 standard closing questions.
Yeah, for sure. Let's do it.
All right, cool. So question number 1, what is your favorite book? And it does not have to be real estate related.
Okay, so my favorite book, this is going to be a little bit odd because I'm like an adult now, but Looking for Alaska. It's a John Green novel. I read it it's like a preteen novel. I read it when I was like really young, probably like early 20s. But it really talked about getting out there and doing things. Long story short, it's about this kid who lives in Paper Towns, which is another John Green novel, but just kind of like cookie cutter town, didn't really have anything. And all he wanted to do was get away, try something different, expand his horizons, like really kind of go for it and go big in life. And he found this girl, her name was Alaska, whatever. But long story short, when I was in my younger years, when I read this book, it really stuck with me because I felt the same way. I grew up where I grew up, and I absolutely love where I grew up, and it's one of the greatest cities in the world. But I always wanted more, and I always wanted to explore more. And that book gave me a lot of motivation to get out there and really challenge myself in life and do different things, and really, push to actually do something like move to California or invest somewhere I've never been, or, it really fundamentally changed the way I think about, taking risks and doing things. So a lot of people who watch this are probably grown adults and probably won't read this book. But for me personally, it really formulated the way I think a lot. And one of the biggest impacts from that book was the fact that he loved death quotes, the protagonist, the main guy. So people's final words before they die. And the one that really stuck with me was, I go to seek a great perhaps. So just always looking like what's out there, what's next, like, what is that great perhaps is a quote that since then has really stuck with me. And it's kind of changed the way I see a lot of the world. So really great book.
I think I've actually read that book.
Yeah, I love it.
But it didn't quite have the impact on me that it sounds like it had on you. Not a knock on the book.
Yeah, no, that book really stuck with me.
That sounds like it. That's great. That's a great recommendation. Well, thank you for that. Question number 2. We actually normally touch on this during the podcast, but interestingly enough, we did not. So I'll be curious to get your take. What is most important to you in real estate investing? Cash flow or appreciation?
For me, cash flow for sure. To be honest, I don't think most of these houses are going to appreciate all that much over time. But you know, some of the reasons I got into real estate are stability. I've worked at a ton of different companies and had to leave jobs, been laid off from jobs, things like that. And I never wanted to be put in a situation where I have a family and I have people relying on me, and for some reason, I can no longer provide due to that. So for me, one of the reasons to get into this is to kind of have steady cash flow. Also another Section 8 thing in the background, right? Having this. So, I think in the past 2 decades, I guess since 2008, houses have appreciated tremendously. And what you hear is a lot of people, especially on Instagram, they're selling courses and they say, hey, buy a house, rent it out. In 10 years, you sell it for $100,000 more. And this is how you get rich. But the landscape is changing. I don't really think that's going to continue. I mean, houses can only appreciate but so much until nobody can afford them anymore. So yeah, I focus mainly on cash flow, because if the houses appreciate, great. But if I can eventually own 30 or 40 of them and it's bringing in me, X amount of dollars per month, and that's consistent, guaranteed by the government, at least for the most part, then you really get the financial freedom that a lot of people want. If you're banking on appreciation, one day the value can be up, one day the value can be down. A lot of people have made a lot of money on it, and I do hope these homes appreciate. But my calculation has more to do with what's the spread on today. Not necessarily like renting them out and hoping for appreciation.
Well, great. Also, very thoughtful answer. Appreciate that as well. Our final question, is there any final piece of advice or insight you'd like to leave the audience with before we wrap this up?
Get out of your comfort zone. A lot of people, and I still talk to people to this day because I post on Instagram and they contact me and they ask me questions. People want to invest where they're extremely comfortable. All I hear is, I'm looking in Florida, Arizona, New Jersey, California. I want to do Airbnbs in Las Vegas. I want to do an Airbnb here because that's what they see, and it's very fancy and it's nice. But not every situation is for everybody. Don't set yourself up for failure where you're buying houses you can't afford the maintenance, or you think you end up falling in love with the place and overpaying for it because that's kind of where you're comfortable and So it's great to be able to buy in your backyard, and if you can make a business out of that, I think it would be awesome, because I would love to be able to see these properties and kind of work on them and be there when things happen. But sometimes when you get out of your comfort zone in states you've never been to, building trust with people you've never met, that might be where you'll find the greatest success. So definitely go out and seek, not to be cheesy, but seek that great perhaps in your business and see what else is out there.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again. This has been a great episode. Really appreciate the thoughtful answers, the level of depth that you took us through. And I certainly am leaving this with a much greater understanding of the Section 8 housing program than I had before. So great to have you on. Thank you, Mike.